Great. So the topic of today is general discussion on startup ecosystem development best practices. Like how do we basically build startup ecosystems? Why do we build a startup ecosystems and anything that has to do with that? My name is Eli David Rokah. I'm the CEO of StartupBlink. I'm always available at email, eli@startupblink.com. So feel free to connect. We'll do a little bit of introduction of Startup Link, then talk a little bit about startup ecosystems, why are they important, and a little bit of guidelines for developing them. So that's basically the idea. So a little bit about Startup Link. It's a global startup map and research center, working together with more than 100 governments, corporations, multilateral agencies, more than 200,000 startups on the database. We're currently tracking 129 countries and 1,430 cities. So we're very, very interested in startup ecosystems. It's a very comprehensive research on practically every city in the world. We're also tracking corporate innovation, more than 350 corporates and their activities. So yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, to kind of try to understand what's going on in the global startup ecosystem. A little bit about some things that are coming up. First of all, the most exciting thing is that we're working on an index to basically rank all countries and cities according to their business environment, which is something we're going to speak about today. We really do believe that business environment is absolutely critical. So what we love to do in Startup Link is to work on business environment, not on another accelerator. So that's something that is a little bit less profitable, but still something that we greatly believe in. We have checked the success stories, recent success stories from the last 20 years. Many of them have been connected to business environments. So this report, this index that is called the Founder Business Environment Index, is going to be launched very soon. Stay tuned. Other than that, we're also launching very, very soon the hardware and IoT startup ecosystem winners in this very deep tech interesting industry, and the energy and environment startup ecosystem winners of 2025. So we have it. If you're on our newsletter, you'll get to have it. If not, you can register to our newsletter on startupblink.com. And yeah, we're mostly known for the index that we do every year, the Global Startup Ecosystem Index. We rank 1,300 cities, 120 countries in more than 100 verticals. So we're not just ranking them in general ranking, but also going much, much deeper on many, many tech markets. I want to talk a little bit about why tech ecosystems matter for entrepreneurs. And we think in Startup Link that generally we really believe what Naval Ravikant says. I don't know if you are any Naval followers here. And basically what he says is that there are three very big decisions in a startup life. What are you working on? Who are you working with? And where are you at? And we think that many people, many entrepreneurs are not paying enough attention to the third question of where you at. And what's happening is that basically, if you are choosing the right location carefully to the best of your abilities, many great things are going to happen compared to a location that is not as good. Um, I think most of us don't, it doesn't come intuitively for us. When you speak with the startup entrepreneurs about their best moments, about the most influential moments in their history of the startup, many of them are random. They are chance encounters. And what happens is that some of those ecosystems, like San Francisco, New York, Tel Aviv, Boston, Paris, Singapore, those chance encounters and those weird connections are happening. And if you're not in those ecosystems, if you're in a small village in, I don't know, Europe or whatever, they're not going to happen. So it's a price that we pay by not being in the right place that we don't really understand, and it's not even painful. We will never know what would have happened if we would be in the right place. And being in the right place doesn't mean that all of us have to be in San Francisco. Um, 100% not. It depends on our industry, what are our aspirations and our limitations as well. But the idea is that we always encourage people to improve. So let's say if you're in a city that is ranked 700, if you can improve to a city ranked 300, you're going to be better off in terms of the location and how the location is going to push you towards success. So that's basically the idea of what we're talking about. Get as close as possible to the flywheel. And basically, successful startup ecosystem just give you access to investors, to clients that are willing to work with startups, that are used to working with startups, to great co-founders. The beauty in San Francisco and those places, that basically those are meeting places. People are just arrived from all over the world to meet in those specific locations. That's what makes them great. Knowledge and events. You're very likely, if you're in San Francisco, to go to the top AI events ever and run into people from OpenAI all the time. Something is not going to happen if you're somewhere else or if you're in a location that is ranked 700 in the world. So that's something that is very, very important, and it's something that we have to, I think about. So that's great. Good. I see we have also Monica from Poland, so good to have you here. So I'll just paste it here. Great. So we have people from all over. That's nice. Keep on introducing yourself, by the way. Again, the idea is for maybe you can create some connections with each other as well. So that's always helpful. Um, Let's talk a little bit about what's going on currently in the world, or the current winners, if you will. So what we have, and again, if you have any questions, feel free. What you have over here is the table of currently the top cities in the world, the top 25. You can also see the total score and the growth rate of all those locations. So as you can see over here, San Francisco is by far at number one. And I do have to say, San Francisco was in deep trouble up to 3 years ago, but then all the AI stuff was starting to be in San Francisco, and that basically saved San Francisco from what I think would be being much closer to New York than what it is now. New York is the second one, mostly built on fintech. Uh, New York has one massive advantage: the U.S. stock exchange is there. New York, that helps a lot. London, also another fintech capital, also with a great stock exchange, it helps because you can do IPOs there and so on and so on. London is the only city that is in the top four that is not in the US. The US is dominating the global startup ecosystem, although it keeps on being narrow, the gaps between the US and the rest of the world. Still, the US is by far the most influential, dominant force in the global startup ecosystem. Nothing even comes close. London is a good example of a city that is managing to become very relevant in the top four. Excellent growth rates, by the way, 29.8, the highest growth rate in the top six. So that's pretty interesting. You have a few startup ecosystems in the top 10, which are not that much global in nature. We're talking mostly about the Chinese and the Indians, Beijing, Shanghai, and Bangalore. They can be in the top 10, even if they're not that open to the world, just by the power of their market population, of their population, which is more than 1 billion people. So those have been very interesting examples of ecosystems that are mostly internal, mostly local, especially China, but are very successful, because when you have more than 1 billion people, you will be successful regardless of what you do. And we have two cities in the top 12 that are of countries that are very small. We're talking over here in Tel Aviv and Singapore. Those are countries of less than 10 million population, and still those two cities, although no local market really exists, manage to go global or extremely regional and be very dominant in the global startup ecosystem. So those are nice examples for all of us that being small sometimes doesn't mean that you're out of the game in startup ecosystem, not at all. So that's a good thing. Let's talk for a second about the topic of ecosystem rankings. And again, if you have any questions, feel free either in the QA or in the chat. The idea is as following: why do rankings matter? So I'll be brief and saying for the following reasons. One, if we don't have rankings, how do we know if we're successful or not? There is no way to benchmark. We are all, and this is important to understand, we're all in a competition with each other. People have only one place that they usually choose to live. You can't divide yourself between America and Europe. You will be in one place as an entrepreneur. Many of the investors are actually focusing also on one location because different location, different regulation, different rules, different headaches, and they can't see the entrepreneurs very frequently, which I like to do. So the idea is that in many cases, nobody knows who is winning unless we try to benchmark against each other and see how everyone is advancing. So that's one thing. The second thing is promotion. So we are great believers that startup ranking should be used as a tool to promote your startup ecosystem based on data, actual data. So those are basically promotional weapons for those that are winning, in a way to kind of signal, hey, things are changing. We are becoming very hot merchant in a way. And it also allows you to understand if you're, the thing I like the most is actually seeing cities and countries that are losing, and it helps them to wake up a little bit, to kind of like have a deep moment of thinking, hey, something here doesn't make sense, and to put pressure on them as well to wake up. Some governments are strictly sleeping. They're not even aware of the concept of startups. They don't have aspirations. And this thing puts them in place and puts a little bit of pressure because in the end of the day, they are spending public sector money, and, and they are receiving priorities. And they just need to prove that actually those priorities make sense. That's kind of like the idea around it. And I think that you can use those rankings also if they're very data driven to build a strategy in terms of how do you develop your startup ecosystem based on the best industries and so on and so on. So there are many reasons to actually track those things and to do whatever you can to basically understand what is your position. Again, there are some ecosystems that are telling themselves that we're all friends, and there are some ecosystems that understand that we're actually, as long as as much as we're all friends, we're competing with each other. Entrepreneurs are choosing only one place, investors are going to invest only in one place, usually. So you want to be this one place. And if you're this one place, someone else isn't. And that's important to say. And people have to make decisions based on those rankings. Which place do they take a bet on? So that's basically the idea. Let's talk a little bit about the reasons for developing a startup ecosystem. And thank you, Tomasz, for presenting yourself on the Czech Republic. I love the Czech Republic. So let's go. And yeah, basically, let's talk a little bit about the reason to develop startup ecosystems. First of all, now I'm in Asia. I'm visiting Thailand, and I can tell you that the best way to avoid the middle income trap, which is basically the countries that are always going to be trapped in being relatively the factories of the world or whatever, but are never going to jump towards high GDP, is to not have a startup ecosystem. Like that's your fastest way to get to being stuck. Because historically, last 30 years, the countries that have pulled out of this middle income trap or the developing countries status, like Israel, like Estonia, in a way like Singapore, compared to what it was 40 years ago, are basically doing that via innovation, technology, and a very robust modern economy. Another reason to have a great startup ecosystem is to develop high quality jobs. Exactly what we talked about before. High quality jobs put you in higher GDP and also create a lot of taxes for the countries that could be used for defense, for socials, for innovation, for education, for health. So the high quality job increased the tax base. The exit increased the tax base as well. Like for example, Israel just had two exits on $24 billion and $32 billion. Those things are very helpful in terms of the now you have money to use it to basically do whatever you need to do, which if not, it would be a major deficit. So in a way, startups are becoming the new oil. And whichever country, and it's oil that never runs out. That's the beauty over here. It's all innovation keeps on spiraling in a way. So it's a beautiful resource, and it's pretty much the most powerful. The human mind and our ability to innovate and to create new things is pretty much the thing that is probably the most valuable resource that we have as a race generally. If you have a good startup ecosystem, you attract investors, you attract foreign entrepreneurs, you prevent brain drain, which is the biggest problem of startup ecosystems. Like brain drain is by far the biggest tragedy there is for an economy. Not only brain drain, you also gain you have brain gain in a way because you're managing to pull from outside high quality people. Your startup economy or your economy is going to be anti-fragile. So, for example, if you're based not on startups, let's say your economy is very much into agriculture or tourism, whenever there is a war or a pandemic and so on, it's game over. But for an economy that is based on startup, it's basically anti-fragile. Basically, it doesn't matter what you do. You can shoot 1 million missiles at it. It can be in a pandemic time. People are still gonna build and ship from their home. So it's actually really cool. The element of how this thing cannot be shut down, regardless of what happens. And it's also creating a lot of strategic ties and improves the brand of the country. For example, Estonia, a super small country, less than 2 million people. The success that they had with Skype and with Pipedrive and with Wise and so on, all of those things created a brand for a country that was extremely small. And so that's important. It's also creating geopolitical advantages. For example, needless to say, you can see an example like some countries in tough situation like Taiwan or Israel, and so on and so on. Their ability, for example, Taiwan of creating the world's most important chip manufacturing company, TSMC, has greatly improved their position and their geopolitics. They've become much more important than what they would have been without it. So countries that get it understand that startups are creating assets that are just as important as an army in a way. That has been a little bit of the understanding and why this thing is becoming more and more important with time. So we'll talk about a few elements that influence the future potential of a startup ecosystem. Just to try to understand, look, it's a complicated field. There are hundreds of them, but we'll try to isolate a few of them, try to go one by one and speak a little bit about them. The first one is basically the flywheel of previous success stories. So the idea over here is that the culture of your citizens eats strategy and policy for lunch, and it takes a very long time to change. So, for example, if most of the population is risk averse, that's a giant issue. Like this one, it doesn't matter how good is your policy and how good your everything can be great, but if people don't want to build a startup, it's a problem. In some locations, people are very risk averse. And the thing about the culture is the following: we have to encourage it because it's not coming intuitively to build a startup. And the reason is the following: if only 10% of startups or less, actually 5%, succeed, if you're in a society that where you fail, you lose faith, you lose your reputation, why would you even build a startup? So what we need here is also a societal change to encourage people to take more risks and to be okay with the art of failing in a way. I do have to say that it is possible. For example, Israel has demonstrated that you can basically move a country that is a developing country into a status of developed countries and creating a massive amount of resources just by having a good startup ecosystem. But and I do have to tell you why is it like places like Lithuania, Israel, Estonia. 40 years ago, everyone wanted their children to be lawyer or doctor, just like now that's the situation in Thailand or in Macedonia, North Macedonia. But success, basically the success of so many people that managed to succeed and they were in the news, now society is saying, no, no, build a startup. We much rather you building a startup than working for Google, for the government, or becoming a lawyer. So this society change is possible, but it requires a lot of time and a lot of success stories to make it happen. And so that's the idea. When your family is pushing you towards building a startup, then you know that you're in a startup society. And some countries are in this situation. And one of the things to think about is, some countries are trying to teach this in school, trying to push people into innovation because they're like, I don't know how to encourage more people to take risks and whatever. I always say this is not something you can teach in school. The inspiration to start a startup, the inspiration usually arrives when your friends around you are becoming extremely successful. And basically in countries like the US or the UK or in Israel or in Singapore, everyone knows someone that has made it big. And that's the real change of society. When you actually see your neighbor or your university friend build a unicorn and you remember that they were less even smart than you, they were copying your homework, then you understand then that gives you the fire to basically go and do your thing. And that usually happens, by the way, when the entrepreneurs are role models. So, in many countries, the role models are the models or the football player and so on and so on. But when you have this thing about celebrating your entrepreneurs, then it really changes society's mindset. I'm now in Thailand, and actually one of my friends told me that now they have a show on Netflix that is becoming very popular about a guy that basically built a giant startup out of the blue. Like he was very poor and managed to build a giant startup. And now the young people in Thailand are kind of like, oh, I also want to build a startup. So we're talking about things that are doable, but they can't be learned in school. They have to be arriving through emotions, through envy, through inspiration, through success stories. A little bit about brain gain or brain drain. We talked about this. The biggest tragedy of an economy is losing top talent. They grow up in a country, they study in a country, and then they leave and give the best to the other to another country. This is a disaster. And the idea is that bad startup ecosystems or low quality startup ecosystem, everyone that has an ambition to build a startup would go away. And the idea over here is that it's very interesting to think about why are those people leaving? We have to ask them. We have to make sure what are the main problems in our ecosystem, and also how can we make more people arriving? If you look at a place like Singapore, um, the vast majority of their top entrepreneurs are foreigners. So they've managed to build a system more than anything of business conditions that bring all the top talent, at least in Southeast Asia and even further, to Singapore. So they're basically receiving all the talent from the outside. And that's a beautiful policy. It's a beautiful success. So that's basically the idea. And we have to remember that startup ecosystems are a zero-sum game. Uh, your entrepreneur, if she or he goes to another place, it's total loss. There's total loss. And if you got an entrepreneur, for example, the story of Toby from Shopify, a German entrepreneur that basically went to Canada and built a company of $50 billion there, Shopify. The impact on the economy is massive, and it's only one person that basically made the decision of moving from point A to point B. Imagine if Germany would have Shopify. It would be almost a different country. It would have a different startup ecosystem. That's why it matters, and it matters a lot. Um, Global. The idea is as following: good startup ecosystems are going global. Underperforming startup ecosystems are going local. Um, you have there is a reason why only two of the ecosystems in the top 10 are or three actually are in the top 10 that they're local, and that's because they have more than 1 billion people in their country. But if you don't have more 1 billion people in your country, you cannot stay local. And even those countries, China and India, that have more than 1 billion people, they will never be in the top two or the top three if they don't go global. So it's enough to be at five, six, nine, but it's not enough to go all the way to the top three. So the idea about going global is very important. Um, we we believe in something that we call the middle-sized market curse, and that's something that if you have a country that has more than 20 million people, but less than 200 or 100 million people, it's a country in problems in terms of startup ecosystems. And the reason is that its entrepreneurs are always confused. Should I build for locally? But there is enough market. For example, I've been recently in Korea. South Korea has 50 million people, and people there are building locally. They're building for the Korean market, and that's a big, big problem for the Koreans because people are saying, hey, we're a big market, but we're a relatively okay market, 50 million or so. And they start to build for the Korean market. They never leave the Korean market. Because the minute you start building local, you build it for language, you build it for regulation, for laws, and so on, for culture. It's almost impossible to go and go global. So the right way to do it is to go global and then go local and do customization, not the other way around. So that has been very interesting to see in some countries of above 20 million people that they're confused. They're not sure. Yeah, that creates a lot of damage. The beauty of actually being a small country, Estonia, Finland, Israel, and so on, Singapore, is that the population knows that they cannot build a startup for local population. So they have to go global from day one. And that's a massive, massive blessing for an ecosystem. And that's why actually in startup ecosystem, being small is totally fine. You can actually be even in the top 10 in the world, like Tel Aviv has shown, by being small. It doesn't matter. You just need to go global from day one. And I would say, connected to the global element, the knowledge of English language is critical. English is the spoken language of the world. It is the biggest market of the world. It is the wealthiest market in the world. So the global startup ecosystem is built on English. Communication skills are incredibly important. And if you have locations that people are having a difficulty to communicate what they're building because they don't speak good enough English, although most of the money, the investors, is in English because everyone uses English as a way to connect with each other, even if they're not native speakers, then you're in a disadvantage. And there is an unfair advantage for native English-speaking countries like the USA, like the UK, like Australia. They do receive sort of a premium because they can build from day one in the language that is the most dominant currently in the world. So that's always something to think about. And another topic to talk about is the social, let's say, perception. In terms of we've seen that there are the social perception usually talks about either you're a manipulator or startup or a hero. So the idea is following. In some countries, like the UK, USA, if you're successful, you're going to be viewed as a hero in a way. In some communist, socialist countries, past communist countries, and so on, um, um, if you're successful, you're gonna be viewed as a manipulator. So the conversation will be totally different. In some countries that are cherishing the idea of a startup hero, if someone is successful, people are gonna say, "Hey, you heard about this girl? She's super successful. She just raised $100 million. So great and whatever." In other places, the mindset would be, no, no, you heard their parents helped them and they probably bribed, right? So the idea is as following. Nobody wants to be a manipulator or considered as a manipulator. Everyone wants to be considered as a hero. So if you are in a place where people are not kind of like celebrating you, but basically talking you down, if you're successful, you would go in the places where you are being celebrated as a hero, you would stay. You would probably become a serial entrepreneur and invest in other startups as well. So we've seen some random success stories in countries where people are viewed as manipulator as default, and those people are just taking off to the US. But in places like Estonia, for example, when people are celebrated as heroes, um, they'll stay. And we've seen example in Estonia, for example, that the same people that built Skype have now built the next generation of the Estonian unicorns, like Wise and like Pipedrive and so on. They call it the Skype Mafia. So that's really important, and it's something that we have to think about our society. Is it a society that celebrates startup heroes, or is it a society that defaults into telling people you're a manipulator? And it changes a lot. Those people are not going to stay if you put a tag on them that they want to be celebrated, they want to be celebrities. If they're not, they're just going to go to the US or to Switzerland and so on and so on. Once again, if anyone has any questions, feel free. I'll check the QA in the chat from time to time. Let's talk about what the public sector should avoid doing. Uh, And in a nutshell, I insinuated this in the beginning. The public sector should not be picking favorites, giving them grants and accelerator programs. And that's something that currently the global public sector has been doing. I have to say that we as StartupBlink, we're always thinking about what kind of services can we do to help startup ecosystem to develop their startup ecosystem. And we are always pushed into let's build an accelerator because that's where the money is, that's where the budgets are. But we basically told ourselves, look, the world does not need another accelerator. The world needs less accelerators. Um, so the idea of the micromanaging a startup ecosystem, interfering, giving grants, and so on, is just doing more damage than good. Basically, when the government is involved. So as fun as it is to be involved, and I know it's fun, you're basically a government official, now you decide the fate of startups, and you give them mentoring and so on. We really believe that we should avoid doing that as government. Because when we do that, basically, it has a lot of conflict of interest. It creates bad decisions because those that make the decisions don't have skin in the game. It's not their money. That's why we love the private sector, not because the private sector people are smarter than public sector. It's simply that it's their money, so they're going to be more intelligent because it's their money. And it hurts them a lot to lose this money. And then again, when we do that, when we do all those grants and we try to micromanage, we're changing the entrepreneurs' incentives. In a good startup ecosystem, the entrepreneur incentives is basically build a great product and sell like crazy. In an ecosystem that is government oriented, that is grant oriented, entrepreneurs are very smart. They're going to change their business model from sales and product because this is extremely difficult to do. And they're just going to change their business model to apply for more grants and getting more public sector money. You basically are making your entrepreneurs from entrepreneurs into bureaucrats by doing that. So we, as StartupBlink, simply decided that it's not for us. We don't want to provide those types of services. We believe in the macro level, in strategy, in promotion, in improving business environment, and celebrating success. That's what we do in a way. And that comes from a very deep belief that in a way, we should let the private sector do their thing. That's the most healthy thing to do. Now, what should we do then? I can't continue to this. Promotion, promotion, promotion. Look, we as public sector, as governments and so on, we have to think like startups. What are startups doing? They're promoting, even if they're not the top in the world or whatever, they're always trying to say, look at me. Because they know that there is a lot of noise, there's a lot of competitors, but they don't have a defeated mindset. I'm not good enough. They're always promoting. And what we like to do is promote the governments we work with data, because then it's even more powerful. It's validated by algorithms. So, but the idea of this muscle, training this muscle of we're great, look at us, is critical. And I think it's an excellent thing. And government should do more of, because no one's going to promote a city or a country, only their owners or guardians, and that's the government. Other thing public sector should do and they almost never do is sales. Basically, they have to pick up the phone and tell people, "Hey, arrive to Dubai, arrive to Tel Aviv, arrive to France." And that's something that they do in a way. I see them more and more in events, but they have to think like a startup. Promotion is the marketing. Sales is basically you arriving and calling leads and dragging them to your city. And it's something you need to do. Strategy is important. We can't be winners in all. And we can't copy paste strategies from other ecosystems because ours is unique. We have our unfair advantages and we have our limitations and problems that are unique. So trying to say, oh, let me copy exactly what San Francisco did, wouldn't work necessarily. Every startup ecosystem has a weird story that brought it to where it is. And the idea is that we should build a strategy that is customized to our unique situation. And usually you know your unique situation only by doing data-driven policy, which is basically understand clearly where you are, analyze, and build a strategy on top of it. And that's something that we love doing. Um, we love events in terms of what governments can do, organizing events, going to events, building portals, building news portals, celebrating success, building databases. Those are all things that we do as well, and we love doing them because we think that they benefit, but they don't interfere and change the incentive of specific individuals. And most importantly, I said this before, improve your business environment. Singapore is winning not because it paid its startup or it gave grants to its startup. Singapore is winning because it has created a superior business environment that people want to say, hey, I want to build my company in Singapore. So basically, the entire Southeast Asia, whoever is ambitious, is now going to Singapore to build a company because it's simply the best place. And so that's sort of like something that has to be said on what is working and what is not working. You know. Um, that's a little bit of the things that we've seen that in terms of mindset that I talked about. If we have a risk-averse population, it's difficult. Again, celebrate success, and with time, it will pass. If we have this negative image of everyone is successful as a manipulator, we're not going to reach far. And we need to celebrate those people that are successful. They're not perfect, but they're the best hope that we've got to basically have an economic success and also encourage people to be like that. There are many ecosystems with lack of trust. I've been in ecosystems in the Caribbean, for example, that people won't even tell you what is their idea because they're sure that you're going to take it away from them and so on and so on. Or this happens also in previous communist parties, countries. It's a problem. If you don't have this trust, things are. I have to tell you, like there are some ecosystems that, especially San Francisco, everyone is helping everyone. And that's such a big force of the ecosystem. And there are a few others like this, like Tel Aviv, for example, is another one. That basically the mentality is give first. And it's so powerful than playing like a bunker and not talking about your idea and so on, because then you're not going to make connections and you can't spread the idea and you can't get more people to join you and so on. So that's kind of some of the problems that we've seen that are affecting startup ecosystem. A little bit about business environment because we mentioned it. I know our time is limited. We have only a few more minutes. I'll conclude with a few more slides. Business environment is the biggest thing, and the idea is as following: how do you make the life of your entrepreneurs easy? Building a startup is extremely difficult. It has 90% or 95% of failure. So on top of it, if you have to deal with basically creating something new, not even knowing if anyone needs it, if it has a business model that can actually be profitable, if on top of it you have to deal with a country that basically makes your life difficult, then it's total madness in a way. So the idea over here is that nothing beats investment of business environment. I sadly say to clients, you know what? Don't work with StartupBlink. Work first of all, if you have a little bit of money, spend it on a reform that makes your tax system better or that gives more incentives and so on. It's the most powerful thing. It's also very, very difficult. And there is a reason why many governments are leaning towards promotion, which is also great because you can achieve great things also on the short term. But if you really want to deal with long-term success, creating a great business environment is key. And what it means is basically make it easy to do business in terms of registration and so on and requirements. Just make it as easy as possible. Make it scalable and profitable. And low taxes, no exit tax, and so on. You basically signal to people, look, if you come here to do business, you're going to become a lot more rich. I'm not going to go after your money. Because again, you're trying to bring people from other countries to your place. You have to be in a situation that you have a revolutionary and aggressive policy to do that, and to have a good banking system, and so on, to have a good brand for the country. It's a great place to do business. Some countries are doing great policies, and then they flip when they change the government and they reverse everything. Nobody trusts them anymore. So what countries like, I'm sorry, I'm bringing up the example of Singapore again, because they're absolute stars in terms of business environment. What they do is basically tell you, look, you do business here, there are not going to be bad surprises. We are stable and very, very clear. So you know exactly what you get when you entrepreneurs. One of the things that they hate the most because they have such low chances of success is also to have instability that is arriving by policymakers that are changing their opinions and so on. So that's something that is very interesting, and we've seen that is extremely important. And again, the beauty is that you don't need to give billions of dollars of grants and to open accelerators in hundreds of millions. All you need to do is a few reforms, open the market and make it easy and good to do business in your country or in your city. That's something that is very important, and we feel like it's really a massive winner. So the conclusion, if your government can only choose one activity to support its local startup ecosystem, just make sure to remove roadblocks for entrepreneurs and make their life easier and let them do their own thing. They don't need you as a mentor. That's basically the idea. And yeah, that's basically a little bit about what we talked about, those things about basically celebrating success stories and so on, and doing whatever we can on the business environment. There are some countries that allow you to register your business in one day. And what we also say, I'll maybe conclude with this, in terms of the gaps between the cities. You have some countries that are very, very central. For example, the UK, London is extremely dominant. France, the same. Paris, extremely dominant. Many countries in Asia. But the idea is to also push forward the other cities, because the other cities are only gonna, we first of all do not believe that all cities have to be equal. You must have a clear winner. In every country, there is a city that has to be the clear winner. And we've seen a few countries, for example, Australia or Spain, Sydney, Melbourne, and Barcelona, Madrid, that people are confused who is the best. They're still debating it. The problem is that when they confuse who is the best, there is no flywheel. There is no one tower that is becoming huge and powerful. So for us, it's always good that the country, in each country, we all know which one is the best city. And it's usually about 10 times better than the second city. The problem is that in some locations, in the total score of the top city is 30 times, 40 times better. And that means that there is a tragedy here, because it means that basically the other cities did not even cross the threshold of critical mass to allow them to develop. And that will also hurt the big city, because the big city receives the talent from the entrepreneurs in the smaller cities. So the idea is that it's not necessarily bad that they start develop things in their own city and then move to the big cities only much later. That's something that we're always kind of like talking about. I'll conclude with a few very short case studies. Singapore, we talked about this. They have basically decided they don't have oil, and they don't have massive resources. They've just built an empire with becoming the place to do business in Asia. And that has been spectacular to see. That's one of the most powerful things. And maybe I'll conclude a little bit with Estonia. We talked about some of those things. Estonia has proved that a country that has less than 2 million people can actually become an actor in the global startup ecosystem. And I have to say, we've never worked really with the government of Estonia, but I've seen their marketing, their startup ecosystem. They're brilliant. They're brilliant because they're sort of like from a country of less than 2 million people, they've managed to really become a name in the global startup ecosystem. I have to tell you, I was there, and the perception is even the reality doesn't catch up to the perception. It's actually not such a easy place to raise investment and so on. But what they've done in terms of marketing, in terms of branding, is just spectacular. They've done some very innovative things on things like the e-residency, nomad visas, and so on. They were one of the first to do that. that have created a lot of attention and buzz around the brand. They understood that they have to market just like a startup in a way. And instead of losing their talent, they're actually attracting talent, and they managed to make sure that the entrepreneurs that were successful in Estonia stay in Estonia and now invest in the next generation of Estonian startups. So those have been a few interesting case studies in terms of the successful countries. And yeah, that's basically it. So my email, I'm gonna write it down to all of you, Ellie at startupblink.com. Want to thank you for arriving today. And we're gonna try to do more and more of those events because we love the topic and we kind of figured out that a lot of you, like we're not a big tribe in the world that is very fascinated by the topic of startup ecosystem development. So I want to congratulate everyone that has been here. You're a unique person because you care about the topic. And yeah, let's continue being in touch and building ecosystems together. So we'll do more of those events and hopefully see you soon. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day. Bye bye.